do you think you are? I am. Woo! 1867 Sports Show back at you for another week, and Kyle made me do that. Kyle made me do that. He literally said before we hopped on, 12-year anniversary of Pete Weber doing the infamous bowling celebration. So had a little do a little homage to our friend Pete in the bowling world.
Is there a more iconic bowling celebration in the history of the sport than Pete Weber talking absolute nonsense to the crowd while he's mic'd up to win the U.S. Open? I mean, what a web gem that was there.
You know what? It stood the test of time for sure. But I think that there's a dude in darts who recently topped that. I don't know if you saw that. There's a guy over in the World Championships of darts, and he like dusted the guy that he was playing to move on to the championship round. And he had a slot on his chest where he peeled down the shirt, just exposed his nipple, and he was flexing his nipple to the crowd. So could
I have not
possibly
seen
take the
that.
mantle.
I have not
Yeah,
seen that, but I will do my homework on it and I'll post a link to it for those watching on the YouTube page there, where they can see that visual spectacular.
yeah. I mean, it's a quintessential ESPN the Ocho type of celebration. So, but yeah, I think it may have taken the mantle for obscure sports celebration. But anyways, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh, we're doing good. We actually had a special guest join us that we'll get to later in the episode, but we're on a bit of a heater here in terms of bringing in some very well-renowned individuals to speak about the Canadian sporting landscape. So golf clap to us for bringing in some special guests. Look at us go here.
We're living up to our promise that we made a couple of weeks ago that we were going to start bringing on some guests. So again, thank you to everyone who's come on thus far, and thank you to everyone who will be coming on in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. So stay tuned. We've got lots to get through. Obviously, another eventful weekend in the world of sports as far as Canadian athletes and newsmakers and headlines. But Mike Morreale from the CEBL Commissioner and obviously former CFL player as well. So lots of Canadian ties there. He's going to be joining the show
Yeah.
a little bit later towards the end of the episode.
And if I'm not mistaken, may have a bit of breaking news in regards to the CEBL in 2024-25.
Yeah, he did. So we've got a 1867 Sports Show exclusive. So before the press releases even go out, you'll be able to get the inside scoop on some stuff. So stick around.
Yeah, no, we love it. Anytime that we can promote Canadian sports, especially with a homegrown league like the CEBL, is just amazing. And the fact that they're doing as well as they are, um, just an incredible job by Mike and his crew to grow the sport. Obviously, it's a game that was invented in Canada, so it's only right that we've got our own league that's doing what it's doing. So yeah, really looking forward to hearing that, because unfortunately I was not a part of that interview. I had prior work commitments, but Kyle took
Wah,
one for the team, and
wah.
Kyle being the ever growing professional that he is, he's just willing to sit in on interviews and conduct all these things behind the scenes and take time away from everything else. And I'm just being selfish on the side, trying to do my job and nothing else. So
Yeah, look at
golf
you.
claps, golf claps with Kyle for
Yeah,
taking him
how
through.
dare you try and keep food on the table and a roof over your family's heads there.
Oh
But
man.
I mean, we're already talking about hoops, so we might as well start off for the first one on our docket here. A little
Yeah.
bit of Vince Carter being a finalist for the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. So, Mr. Original Face of the franchise up north here. Probably, I wouldn't say a slam dunk, but he's got as good a shot as any on that ballot of hearing his name called for that next upcoming class.
100%. And I think when you look at the criteria that a lot of these voters look for when it comes to voting someone in the Hall of Fame, he's got pretty much everything besides that elusive championship, right?
Yeah.
He's got the longevity, he's got the production, he's got playing with multiple teams and making them better, right? And not only that, you look at the state of Canada basketball right now, with not only the Raptors, but with the national team and the growth of the sport in this country, that's all linked back to Vince Carter and his time with the Raptors. Like the guy's
Mhm.
nickname was Air Canada for a reason. He was the human highlight reel after Dominique Wilkins. I mean, every week he was doing something amazing. That was when I really fell in love with the sport. Was I kind of come up through the Michael Jordan years, and yeah, Chicago's winning all these championships and whatnot, but to see something like that, and I mean, a lot of people will say, you had Kobe Bryant, yes, you had LeBron James, yes, like all these other guys, but the one guy that everyone always comes back to say he could have been so much bigger than he was, but he was just he was an unselfish player, and contrary to popular belief, some people might, still hold a grudge against him during his the final years of his Toronto career. But um, I just look at what he was able to do, and he brought everything. He could shoot the basketball, he could dribble, he had handles. Obviously, he could jump out of the gym, and maybe that one thing that was missing was just that tenacity, killer instinct like a Kobe Bryant had. But how many people actually have that type of thing,
Mhm.
right? So I mean, I think it's a slam dunk. I look at everything that he did with his body of work, and if he doesn't get in this time around, then it's not going to be very far in the near future
Yeah.
until he gets in, right? So that kind of you know brings it up of you know what's going to happen throughout that whole process, and maybe we'll get your thoughts on what you think of his chances of getting in, but you know I don't know. It just seems like a no brainer for me.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's going to be fairly as close to 100% as you can get there realistically. Of he'll get in eventually. Is it a first ballot Hall of Famer? Maybe, maybe not. I think he's got as good a shot as anyone, and I would frankly kind of be a little bit surprised just because of his impact on the game itself, beyond
Right.
just what was his career stat line, right? So I think he is a first ballot Hall of Famer, but if he doesn't get in, it's a matter of when, not if. It's not
Yeah.
going to be one of these guys who is going to languish on voting ballots for too long. I think at the end of the day, though, anyone who is still kind of harboring that grudge from how he exited Toronto, enough time has passed here that I would have loved to have
Yeah.
gotten that little farewell tour when he was kind of bouncing around from team to team.
Mhm.
In the twilight of his career. It seemed like at certain times it was on the cusp of happening, and then it never materialized. So
Yeah.
y- I'm not too concerned about the manner in which he left, because I, now that time has passed, kind of put that more on the Raptors front office, because had they
100%.
gotten a legitimate return for him, right, rather than like Alonzo Mourning and a whole bunch of contracts to just thrown in there to make it work, and essentially zero impact really from trading one of the biggest stars in the sport at the time. Yeah, you can say that, hey, well, he kind of held him hostage a little bit, so he diminished his value, but you cannot sit there and tell me that that was the best offer that was on the table
Yeah.
there. And if it was, well, you know what? Like, what would have hurt holding on till the summer, and maybe, the markets have reset a little bit and it's a sign and trade instead of a let's trade him in
Yeah.
season type thing. So I put a lot of the ill will towards how he exited now, with the passing of time, more so on the front office there, because he was well within his right to demand a
Yeah.
trade at that point. The Raptors were languishing. It was clear that, they were never going to be a true contender. The Nets had, had a couple deep playoff runs there, and were very much looking like a team that could make some noise in the East. So he was looking out for his career, and obviously chasing that championship ring that ended up ultimately eluding him throughout his career, which is really the only knock you can put on the guy when you look at the resume that he's put together with, Olympic gold medals and
Yeah.
the tens of thousands of points he scored, all the viral video moments and everything like
Yeah.
that. So again, I think it's not a matter of if, but when it comes to Vince hearing his name called for the Hall there.
Yeah. And the cool part is like he just came out recently and said that when he does get in, it just makes sense that he's going to be wearing a Raptors jersey when he
Yeah.
goes in, right? That's where it all started. The impact that he had. Again, we spoke to it on the country, but you got to look at some external factors here too. He resurrected the dunk contest
Yeah.
back in 2000. He only did it one time, and everyone was trying to get that Vince Carter moment for about 20 years after that, right? And it was always going back to, well, that's what you need to do. He set the standard for the performance you need to have to captivate an audience when it comes to a dunk contest. And then you look at, the very, what's the
The
best way
piss
to put this?
poor performance that happened in the dunk contest this year. Jaylen Brown, we're looking at you. You sat down someone who's
Yeah.
4'11" in a chair and then dunked and barely made the dunk, and then you pretended like you did it blindfold. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
travesty. We call it what it is. Anyone who watched
Yeah.
this year, last year, any of the recent dunk contests, you're being too nice right now. You're turning into an old softy the older you get. It was
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
They should be ashamed of
Yeah.
themselves.
For sure. It definitely wasn't. And I mean, but that spawned a new way of playing basketball. Everybody wants to say like Steph Curry's changed the NBA, and he has. Like the way that he plays the game now, it's influenced so many youth coaches to train their players to do that because not everybody can be 7 feet tall. You can still be, a great player if you're only 6 feet tall, but if you can shoot the basketball, you're good.
Yeah.
Vince Carter really came in an era where it was very much, a jump shot league.
Mm-hmm.
And when he came through in that rookie year and showed that, wow, this guy could really take off from anywhere on the court and dunk over people, it brought people back to that time in the 80s when you had Dominique Wilkins, Michael Jordan, Julius Irving, like those guys posterizing people, right? And you know that's what really made basketball cool again was to watch a guy like Vince Carter do it. So, I look at that and again the impact that he had in Toronto, and I mean, not only him getting into the Basketball Hall of Fame, I really hope that Toronto does right by him and
Mm-hmm.
retires his jersey as the first person to ever get their jersey retired by the franchise.
Yeah.
It's long overdue. This really needs to happen. I mean, I think that what was it, 2018 when he came back and was playing for Memphis, and the crowd gave him a standing ovation when they showed, a little clip, a highlight clip of him. And I think that was kind of that, all right, maybe the leaf has turned over a little bit and people have, finally moved past that really sore spot, on team history. So, yeah, be that as it may, management, I think, was not prepared to come in and handle a big personality like a Vince Carter.
Mm-hmm.
You had, some iffy pieces here and there that you were trying to, piece together to make it so that way he could be happy. But I mean, Jalen Rose was not the same Jalen Rose that we saw in Indiana. Donyell Marshall was on the tail end of his career. Hakeem Olajuwon, they tried to bring in a couple of years earlier than that, was on the tail end of his career. You really didn't have those guys that you could really say, okay, well, that takes a little bit of pressure off of Vince Carter. And by the time that Chris Bosh was there, that was when Vince is kind of, on the way out with injuries and, being unsettled with management and whatnot. So, yeah, it was a situation that was doomed to fail. But I mean, I look at it, he resigned. He was the first big name to resign with the team. He kind of set the standard of, all right, this is a good place to play. This is representing a full country when you're playing for this team. So, yeah, I would say get him in the Hall of Fame, retire his jersey at the, what was it called now? Scotiabank Arena.
Yeah.
But I think they should rename it Air Canada Center just one last time when they retire his jersey because like Air Canada just makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think that there's so many positive things you can take from this Vince Carter situation and really make it cool to go to a Raptors game and see the number 15 hanging up in the Raptors.
Yeah. And that's just it is like you have to realize there are so few players, NBA or any sport really, who can sell tickets coming to a visiting arena just on them alone, right? Like you look at the modern NBA, Steph Curry obviously won, LeBron used to be kind of KD, but like right now, like it dwarfs in comparison to the spectacle that when
Yeah,
Vince Carter was rolling into town for a Raptors franchise that was really an afterthought for a lot of American viewers,
for
right?
sure.
Like absolutely zero reason to tune into this, oh, can they sneak in eighth place into the Eastern Conference? They're not a powerhouse. You just saw the Vancouver Grizzlies kind of fizzle out because of attendance issues and lack of people tuning in and this, that, and the other. So he really did absolutely put that Toronto franchise on the map south of the border and became appointment
Yeah.
viewing where people were actually tuning in to watch him. The biggest travesty of his career is I think he was about 10 to 15 years early. If he had have come around during the age of social media and TikTok and all these clips that go viral and can be shared left, right, and center, he would have been the most recognized person or athlete probably on the planet just with how much stuff would have been shared because his dunks were absolutely unbelievable. Like you can point to the 2000 dunk competition all you want, but ask a lot of real hoops fans what the most iconic Vince Carter moment is. And it's
Olympics.
the 2000 Olympics, dunking, jumping straight, like not just like jumping into him, but clearing the 7'2" Frenchman, Frederick Weiss. And he did it
Yeah.
clean. Like, and so this is always one of those things. It's always interesting to see, a casual fan who sees a dunk that loses their mind. And, no one else, none of the people on the court are really reacting because it's like, okay, that was just kind of a nothing moment for them. Like Kevin Garnett loses his mind when he sees that happen right next to him. Like the entire gym froze, stopped
Yeah.
playing to the point that the ref, if you actually watch in the
Yeah.
highlights there, has to physically put the ball into the French player's hands so that they walk
Yeah.
back and inbound it.
And it almost gets eerily quiet too, which is like people don't really understood, people don't really understand what they saw. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was like, again, I go back to the dunk contest. The one dunk that people didn't really react to, but it was one of the more impressive ones, is when he put his arm in the net.
The
Because
honey
everyone's
dip.
looking like, did,
Yeah.
did he just do what I thought he did? And that was that same reaction on the grandest stage on international basketball. So, yeah, the impact that he has not only in the NBA but internationally, 100%. I think that we've kind of made his case to get
Yeah.
into the Hall of Fame and whatnot. So, anyone on the voting committee, listen to this show. We've just cleared a path for him to get in. Let's go get number
There you go.
15 into the Hall of Fame.
Enshrine him and send the jersey up to the rafters and let's get a little bit of momentum behind here because there's arguments to be made that there's some other players who are still active now but coming to the ends of their careers whose numbers deserve to go up there as well, but they don't deserve to be the first ones up there. That's
No,
got to be Vince.
no. And realistically, I think there's four.
No.
You got Vince, you got Lowry, you got DeRozan, and even though he was only there for a year, I think you got to put Kawhi Leonard on there, man.
I don't know. I think there's some debates about that, and I think where I've ultimately fallen into with Kawhi is, listen, you can Ring of Honor him, you can build a statue outside if you want, kind of commemorating the shot, but retired jerseys, you got to have a little bit more longevity there than just a one and done there, right? So that's where I
Yeah,
fall, at least. There's other ways to recognize people other than retiring jerseys.
true.
To me, the ultimate honor in sports is your jersey goes up to the Raptors.
Yeah, 100%. We'll debate on a later episode, and we'll make a pros and cons list.
There you go.
Um, but I mean, we're talking about the impact that Vince Carter had on the game of basketball and everything. There's another sport that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, and actually a team that we've been talking about, quite recently, which kind of makes this even more of a head scratching type of scenario. But going over to hockey, the Winnipeg Jets, we talked about the success that they were having, and they are having this season with their lineup, with everything that's been going on. But the report recently came out with their CEO saying, well, ticket sales are at an all-time low since the franchise moved back here. It's not financially viable if it continues to be this way. I don't see the team being here for the long term if we can't, if we can't resurrect our ticket sales. So, I mean, is this something that you think is more of ticket prices have just gotten too high for the population of Winnipeg to justifiably bring their families out to a game? Or is this a case of Winnipeg, you've already had this happen before, you kind of let your foot off the gas a little bit, and now have to play a little bit of catch up to get back to those games? Like, are they taking the team for granted, or is it a situation where the modern day NHL is just pricing people out of going to a game?
Yeah, I think you can be two things at once here, right? And I would definitely make the argument that you need to be very careful in how you price things in a market like Winnipeg, where despite the
Yeah.
fact that you've got an absolutely ravenous fan base, right? It is so much easier to sit on your 4K TV at home. You got your free, well, not free, you bought them already, but you got your beverages beside you. You got your chips. You don't have to wait in line for bathrooms, no parking, none of that. So there's more options than ever for a fan. It should also be noted as well too, like, Winnipeg's got the second smallest arena ahead of Mullet
Yeah.
Arena down in Arizona right now. So we're talking about 15,000 people, not trying to sell out,
Yeah.
a 20,000 seat facility there. So for them to be, raising the alarm bells here, it's a little bit concerning, right? Because you've been down this
Mhm.
pathway once before, and guess what? You're very fortunate you got your franchise back, albeit under different circumstances. But you lose it again, there's not going to be a third time, right? So
No.
it's a little bit of, okay, you want this, you better go out there and support it. Otherwise, there'll be, a Houston or a bigger market that doesn't care so much about the ticket prices, because they've got such a population base advantage that they can draw from, as opposed to the booming metropolis that is Winnipeg, Manitoba. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. But all of that now being said, right, you've got the NHL talking about expansion, you've got them talking about trying to bring things to markets like Houston and whatnot, right? The NHL as a league needs to project stability. And if you are
Yeah.
going to sit there and tell me that Gary Bettman, whose pet project in the desert has been failing for 15 years now and has been on absolute life support, like, absolutely, it's like Kramer when he's in the other side of darkness, the coma movie there, like,
Yeah.
do we resurrected, do we not there, right? Like, that thing should have been put out to pasture about 15 times.
Yeah.
So if you're going to sit there
Yeah.
and tell me, oh, we might move Winnipeg, you're playing out of ASU's home facility. Right? You don't even have an arena. Shut up. If any
Yeah.
franchise moves before the Arizona Coyotes, Gary Bettman needs to wear that as the absolute biggest joke in sports history. And I'm
Yeah.
not pulling any punches there. Like, I feel very strongly about that. That old Gary's little science experiment out in Glendale or Tempe or wherever they're trying to get their new arena that's still not approved. If you even think about moving a team before that monstrosity out in Arizona, oh my God, common sense has left the room at that point.
Yeah, and that was exactly where I was going to go to, because I'm under the same belief as you. I mean, you're willing to absolutely bankrupt by keeping Arizona Coyotes afloat, by dipping into the coffers to say, well, revenue sharing says that we have to keep the team alive and whatnot. And this is your chance to show that, well, it's not just a pick your poison type of thing. We be selective on who we want to save and who we want, to go away. Because I don't know about you, they didn't really work too hard to keep Atlanta, when they were struggling down there. So for whatever reason, I thought the same thing when the news came out. If this is a situation where Gary Bettman really wants to put his stamp and get away from that, I don't know what you want to call it, the image that he's being portrayed as, of not giving a what about Canadian franchises, this is the opportunity to do that. And I mean, so it's a three-pronged approach. I mean, obviously the fans of Winnipeg, they need to, start to realize that this is a really good chance of their team moving again. And like you said earlier, if it leaves again, it ain't coming back. Two, the team's got to be, cognizant of everything that's happening in their community and whatnot, and giving people, one, a more affordable option to go to a game, and then two, making it so that way you want to go. Like you're saying, it's easy to sit on your couch, have your snacks, have your drinks, not have to fight for a bathroom. But there's something about live sports that's just, it's the spectacle of it that draws people in. And if you don't have something that's going to keep people's attention when you go to a game, you've lost them. They're not
Mhm.
coming back. So, and then from a league perspective, like you guys, before this gets too far down that rabbit hole, and again, I'm sure that the conversation's been had, but if it hasn't, or if it hasn't been talked about enough, you need to have a come to Jesus moment with the league and the franchise to say, where do we have to turn to get out of this? What's our 5 year plan here?
Mhm.
Because, like you're saying, with the franchise, with the expansion, you know, talks being heightened in the last couple of years with these markets like Kansas City, like Houston, they're talking about even bringing one overseas. Like, this is not a good place for a struggling franchise to be because the first one to get plucked are the teams that are struggling in the current landscape.
Mhm.
So hopefully they could, turn this around. And I mean, if you're not going to go to a game with a team performing as well as they are right now, then what do they have to do? Like, what do they have to do to get you out? So
Yeah.
let's just hope that everybody kind of realizes the, the dire need of, people going to these games and change it quick.
Yeah. Well, the Jets can do themselves a lot of favors by going on a deep playoff run because there's nothing that reinvigorates a season ticket base more than, hey, look what
Yeah.
we just did last season, right? So
Yeah.
hopefully, maybe they're flirting with Lord Stanley's mug come springtime and it's all a moot point come 2024-25. But yeah, it's there's a lot of dominoes that could fall here and it could go down a pretty ugly path if things don't
Yeah.
change in a hurry.
Yeah, because you know just as well as anybody, there's a lot of people with deep pockets down south of the border who are just waiting for an opportunity to bring a team in. So, I mean, even you look at, the fellow who owns the Utah Jazz, he's already, filed an application to bring a team to Salt Lake City. So, there's a guy who's like, I got more money than I know what to do with. I'm willing to, bring whatever, pay whatever price it takes to get the team to come here. Well, guess what's more fiscally responsible? A relocation or an expansion?
Yeah.
Relocation.
Yep. Well, I hear, the Tulane Green Wave just built a new arena, so it could always move down there, keep the collegiate world tour of Bettman's fantasies going. So
I would love it if New Orleans got a hockey team. They would not know what the hell was going on.
wouldn't know what hit him. Yeah.
But anyways, let's hope that the Jets can figure it out. Yeah, like you're saying, go on that, a deep playoff run to reinvigorate that fan base a little bit. But speaking of hockey, there's been the fella who's been reinvigorating a lot of old school, Don Cherry rock and sock him type moments lately. And I think a lot of people are kind of flocking more towards a team like the New York Rangers recently because obviously one, they're on a heater right now. They've won 10 in a row. And I think one of the reasons why is because they've got a young upstart right now in Matt Rempe, who is like the reincarnation of Bob Probert all of a sudden and is just fighting everybody. The kid, he looks like an absolute monster on the ice, 6'7", 240 pounds. And every time that they're going to an arena now, whether they're home or away, fans are getting up for a game, right? So, what are your thoughts on this? Because I've got my feeling on, kind of bringing back this old school type of mentality when it comes to a hockey enforcer. But I'll turn it over to you first.
Yeah. Well, it really does kind of make you think like, my God, if Grapes could ever get himself back on television, it would have to be for a hockey night in Canada featuring the New York Rangers, where, he was what was it, Delorier he was fighting the other day against
Yeah,
Philadelphia.
what a
And
scrap.
like, there's very much a kind of trial by fire that happens anytime these kind of bigger enforcers, big bodied kids come to the league. And everyone and anyone who's on that fourth line, who's on the verge of getting sent back down to the AHL franchise, is just champing at the bit to try and, drop the gloves with you. And he has not been overly selective with who he will turn down. He seems willing to drop him with anyone. So he's certainly putting some mileage into his 5-game stint that he's had throughout
Yeah,
his career so far. And I'm all for it, right? Like there are those who will say there's no place for fighting in hockey and blah blah blah, and it's like, you know what? You're the people who believe one way or another, they're pretty firmly entrenched in that belief, and you can probably
right.
present them with any number of arguments and they're still going to walk away either believing that nope, you need to keep fighting in the game, or nope, it has no place in the game, right? So we're
Yeah,
not here to try and convert anyone. I think with this discussion, but I personally like it as long as you are playing a role on that team, and it could be as simple as not even necessarily sticking up for the code of hockey and,
mm,
guard all those empty nets so we don't take hard slap shots into them and whatnot. But more so just, being a spark plug off the bench and hey, it's 1-1. We've been kind of hemmed in our own zone for a little bit. The boys are looking dead out there. Like, let's get a little bit of juice going, send him over the boards. Maybe he does muck it up. Maybe he just throws a big hit, but like that's something you can at least use as a coach. Where I don't like it is you've got some of these relics like, a Ryan Reeves who is an absolute liability. Like ask any Leafs
mhm,
fan and every advanced metric and even eyeball test will back it up. So it's not just a nerd stat type thing here. Like he's a liability when he's on the ice
right.
and everything will back up that, the Leafs are actually better when he's up in the press box as a break in case of emergency deterrent rather than an on ice product. So
Yeah,
it's a fine line you've got to walk, in my opinion. But as long as he's still bringing it and providing some juice and spark off the bench, great. Is it going to last 15 years or 10 years? Probably not. But for however long it does, like capture lightning in a bottle and run with it.
yeah, and I mean, we always talk about branding. This is the exact opportunity that he's using to really kind of set himself apart from the modern day NHLer, which keeps him on the top of people's minds, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, obviously he's only 21. He's got a long career ahead of him. Kid can actually play. He's pretty good skater for a guy his size. He's got good pedigree. He's a Western Canadian kid, and yeah, I mean, I think that given the landscape of where the NHL is right now, it's really kind of gotten away from the physicality aspect
Mhm.
of it, right? Like you don't see much body checking anymore, let alone fighting. So the fact that you're seeing this now and it's blowing up, like people are loving it
Yeah.
because this is what made hockey kind of, you know, explode in the 70s and 80s is when you had these tough guys like the Broad Street Bullies who were fighting everybody. Then you got the Edmonton Oilers when they got McSorley and Dave Semenko who were out there patrolling the ice to keep, Gretzky and Messier and the crew, safe and sound. And then you go into the craziness that was like the Ty Domi, Bob Probert, Kordic, Troy Crowder era. Like that was a different brand of hockey. But again, you talk about selling tickets. You know what the highest selling games were back in those days? It was when Bob Probert and Troy Crowder rolled into town. Like that was that was the biggest show in town. So I think that bringing this type of element back, it's not that it has to be something that happens every game, not that
Yeah.
it has to be something that happens every shift, but the fact that it's still there and it could happen, that's part of that, non-existent, code that we speak about all the time where, all right, well, someone's not going to take liberties, giving Sidney Crosby a cross check in the back, if he's got somebody out there who's going to drop the mitts and, take him out. And, you know, it's, uh, it's kind of nice because like obviously when I grew up playing hockey, a lot of the guys that I played with went on to go have very successful careers. I mean, one of them was Zach Stortini, who good hockey player, was a second round pick or third round pick. Sudbury Wolves had a good career there. Second round pick with the Edmonton Oilers, and he was kind of the understudy to George Larac
Mhm.
when he was there, right? And Zach had a great career because he was willing to do the things that not a lot of people were. And he was on those upstart, underachieve or overachieving, Oiler teams because he had a role and he did it well. So, you know, I hope that this kid can keep it up. I hope that, he's not looked at as being like, okay, well, you got to fight if you want to stay up here
Yeah.
because like he can't play. And, to your point, I think if he can carve out a nice a Brian Boyle type of role, like big body presence who can, kill penalties and, maybe get 10 to 12 minutes of ice time a game. That's what keeps you in the league.
Yeah.
So I like it, and I'm going to be watching more Ranger games, making that more of a focus because I want to see what this kid can do. And the one thing I will say though, I mentioned it to you already. He's just got to make sure that he's protecting his face because he's taking way too many bombs right now. So he's not exactly grabbing his opponent's shoulder to stop being punched. He's more grabbing it for momentum to carry the person's face towards him. So that's all fine and dandy, but you got to protect yourself in a fight too, not just chuck him willy nilly. So my one tip of advice for Mr. Rempe.
Yeah, got to protect the moneymaker. So, either get the Floyd Mayweather shoulder roll or just learn basic physics as far as, punchy, kind of hurty at some points here. Like,
well, the thing is, like, you've got a reach advantage over everybody that you're fighting, right? So use that. Like, use that long wingspan that you've got to keep people away from you, right? So, anyways, I'm not here to lecture the kid on how to do what he's doing because obviously he's doing it pretty well. So, don't want him to get hurt. That's all. That's all.
Yeah.
Kind of a good segue because speaking of hurting, obviously the shifting over to baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays. I think a lot of fans are still hurting over the off-season letdown that has been. And I mean, the punches just keep on rolling in because like they've missed on Jorge Soler now, they've missed on Cody Bellinger now. Now they're talking about, well, they could revisit with Matt Chapman, but he's going to expect the same type of contract as Cody Bellinger. And it's like, for all the things that are happening and that they're not doing, this was an opportunity for them to really kind of wipe the slate clean, come out in spring training and, just, go back out there. And I mean, we're not going to hold spring training scores, to, to anything significant here, but some of the issues that were lingering at the end of last season are starting to rear their ugly head again in the first couple of games of spring training, which is the bats were a little quiet in the first couple of games, and the pitching was really struggling, in some big spots with runners on base. So I think with this Blue Jay this year, understanding where people kind of value you right now, where they hold you right now, and where they're projecting you right now. All three of them are different things, and they're all volatile.
Yeah.
So I think what they ultimately, have to do to kind of put some people at ease is maybe rattle off some good things with spring training, like getting Vladdy's back going, getting Woes back going, because those two guys are the catalysts. They're going to drive the ship. And if they can kind of, lead the charge in getting the bats to, kind of make more contact, you've got a savvy veteran in there with Justin Turner now. He can maybe, be that mentor that they've been lacking the last few years because that their starting pitching is going to be solid again, right? So I think that, a lot of concerns can be eased, even though, again, spring training is exactly what it is. It's meant for understanding what you have, understanding potentially what you could have in a couple of seasons, and they're really kind of fine tuning some things before the grind of the regular season starts. So, early thoughts on spring training so far with the Blue Jays, and anybody standing out to you so far?
Well, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head there as far as, all right, spring training. I mean, it's a way to shake off the rust, get through it. No major injuries, and it's kind of like NFL preseason where it's like, all right, you get a couple of at bats here, and then you're going to be off this day, and it's mostly just roster management taking a look at some of the unknown quantities there. So I'm not putting a whole lot of stock into any of the actual results there. I think to your point though about a lot of the off season being talk and not a whole lot of execution, right? They were on the 1 yard line how many times with some of the names that they were linked to, and then something went awry and whatnot. So you've now starting to see that translate into a us against the world mentality in some of the comments from like a Bo Bichette who, before they were always viewed as, oh, they're going to take the next step and they're going to succeed this year and it's going to be bigger and better. And now people are starting to doubt them a little bit. So instead of things being,
Yeah.
anointed the next ones, they're kind of like, well, they are what we think they are. They're a little bit of the underdogs at this point, which maybe that's a little bit of what this team needs, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's a team that was a contender right up until the very
It could
end
have been
last year.
it could have been a contender.
Could have been a contender, but like they're not a bad team, but they do have still a lot of the same question marks that they had last year, where they didn't go out and take a huge swing and address it, as far as like, hey, this guy, he's the difference maker. He's the one that
Yeah.
we were kind of missing last year. So do you run it back with Chapman? Like, I mean, sure. Like, why not? Like, if it's going to end up being a Bellinger, which, Bellinger, they announce it, 3-year, $80 million contract, but opt out after year one, opt out after year two. So he's essentially opting out after year one, barring injury, which just gives him
Yeah.
the financial flexibility of, okay, well, I'm not going to re-hit the market as a free agent if I only got 90 games under my belt. Like,
Yeah.
I'll renew. So even bringing Chapman back up with something like that, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but is it what the
Hmm.
Blue Jays fans were hoping for at the onset of last season? Absolutely not. Right? Like,
Yeah.
so as far as the roster construction and spring training is concerned, it's mostly like get some looks at some of the prospects. Is Orelvis Martinez going to be breaking camp with them? Is he going to be back in AAA? What about Ricky Tiedemann? Like, so there's some things like that probably need to get ironed out. But by and large, you're kind of just copy and pasting what they had last year into this year, but throw in the red bearded Justin Turner out there for some clubhouse hijinks, and that's kind of where you're at. Like the biggest
Yeah.
like spring training thing to me was, don't know if you saw, but our good friend Tim Miza, the pitcher who had to do bat boy duties as a result of his last place fantasy football punishment, which is just a phenomenal punishment for
Yeah.
a
Love
league
it.
full of professional baseball players.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was phenomenal. I mean, it's good that they can, again, have a little fun with that. Shows the camaraderie that they have. And yeah, it was a good story. And I mean, going to your points, I think that we're kind of circling the wagons, right? Like we're understanding kind of where the Blue Jays are, what's going to drive this team going forward. And the one thing that I really, do, think can make this team, take that next step. You've got a very high profile young pitcher who's just tearing up every single level that he's been going through. And speaking about Ricky Tiedemann,
Mm-hmm.
this kid has shown electric stuff since they drafted him a few years ago. And I just look at where this team can really make their hay. And, we already talked about their starting rotation being a very good starting rotation, their bullpen being very good, their closer being very good. But this is the type of guy where if you can get Manoah to show any type of semblance to the, Alek Manoah of, 2, 3 years ago, and then you get a kid like a Tiedemann coming up who could fill in for, and let's be honest, like, Kikuchi is who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's an innings eater. He overachieved last year. He's got some decent stuff, but is he the guy that I would trust to go out there every 5 days and take on the Yankees or Orioles or Rays? No, he's not. This Tiedemann kid, if he keeps progressing the way that he is, this is a guy who
Mm-hmm.
can, lead your rotation as a young player. And I mean, now you're looking at Gossman, Barrios, you've got Bassett, you've got a resurrected Manoah, and now potentially you got Tiedemann, who's coming in to fill that fifth starter role.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get that Manoah back that you saw a couple years ago, name me a better starting rotation in the MLB right now. If all five of those guys are pitching at the top of their game,
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it, right? Is there's so many sliding glass doors moments that could happen this season. You could, exactly as you laid out right there, have an absolutely lights out, like we're going back to, the early 2000s Oakland Athletics, like when you got Barry Zito and Mulder and like just an unbelievable pitching. And then you've got, not an offensive juggernaut like the Yankees are essentially going to be this year with Soto and Judge and all of that.
Yeah,
But
he looks okay so far.
yeah, they're gonna be all right. But like you're gonna have some of those players who get it done in big situations, like
Yeah,
Vladdy Jr. and Bo Bichette and George Springer, and they'll be able to come through, right? So if you've got elite level pitching and above average offense, that's a recipe for 100+ wins. But
yeah,
if Manoah
yeah,
comes back and he's, the same as he was last year or worse, okay, we got some problems. What if Kikuchi now all of a sudden, flash in the pan and hey, we tried moving you back to the bullpen because we thought Tiedemann was going to be the solution here, but then, he came in and got roughed up a little bit as a rookie, and so now we're moving you back, and there's a lot of things that could go wrong with that
yeah,
plan. And so I think that's where fans were kind of hoping that that big bat would come through, or that big, Yamamoto style Japanese pitcher signing coming through
mhm,
and being like, here's a sure thing, right? Because you look at what the Los Angeles Dodgers are trotting out there and you're like,
yeah.
don't have too many questions about this product right now. Whereas the Jays, you could tell me comfortably that they're going to win 105 games or they're going to win 75. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of different pathways to get to those numbers, and
yeah,
they're all very viable options for sure. Especially as a Red Sox fan who knows that his team is going to finish dead last in the AL East for a third consecutive season. Look at the state of the rest of the teams in the
yeah.
AL East with the Yankees, what the Orioles are doing, and their unbelievable farm system. That's only going to get even better when Jackson Holiday comes and probably breaks camp with this team out of spring training. You look at the Rays, who are just a friggin' Michael Myers zombie, just never dies. Doesn't matter what they trade or what they do, they go out and win 90+ games. Like, just a
Can we
perfect
just
storm.
give, yeah, can we just give props to the Tampa executive team for doing exactly what you're just doing? Like,
No, I will not,
there's,
because that's
yeah,
where they poached Chaim Bloom from, and then he just torpedoed the last couple of years for the Red Sox. So the hell with the Rays executives. I'm not giving them any flowers
well,
whatsoever.
I'm going to give them their flowers because there's no
Yeah,
way
because
in
they
hell.
sabotaged us.
Yeah,
Played right into your
there,
hands.
there is no way in hell that a team with as much, we talk about the Jets, going through what they're going through right now. Tampa is going through this every single year with their stadium, with their fan base, their ticket sales, with their government, oh, maybe we won't fund them. Okay, we're going to fund them again. And, the flip flopping back and forth, they don't even know if they're going to have a team there in the next couple of years. And every year they trot out this team and they're 90+ wins every year. And they never spend big on anybody. So I I mean, you can hate them all you want. I got to give them props because that's the model of
It's a very
consistency.
respectful hate that I have for them.
Yeah, oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. But like that's just one thing where every franchise wishes they could get to because you look at the gold standard in baseball is the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s Atlanta Braves.
Mhm.
Like there was not a more stable franchise than that team. And the fact that you're seeing it in today's, you know, professional sport landscape with salary caps, with free agency the way that it is, it's incredible. So let's just hope that, you know, for your sake, the Red Sox can figure out a little bit of how to get back to that. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about Toronto for a reason, and they've got the pieces to make it work. It's just can they get those pieces to do what they need them to, right? So
Yeah.
now it comes down to, all right, Mr. Schneider, what do you got as a lineup? What do you got that's different from last year? Are you going to pull, you know, Barrios out of a big game where he's pitching lights out and it's the best he's looked all season? And the analytics have a time and place. Gut feel, that's how the greats separate themselves from the good. So, anyways, let's just hope that this team kind of takes that that the horrible way that they went out last year. and really uses that as motivation to get back to that point and fix those mistakes that they ultimately made down the stretch that, cost them a sweep in the first round. So
Mhm.
yeah, again, early in spring training, we've got a lot of runway in the month of March to kind of figure out what the team's going to look like. But I'm interested to see what they're going to break camp with at the end of the month.
Yeah, I'll be paying more attention to my fantasy baseball roster than any comings or goings at Fenway Park this season. But yeah, no, it's definitely interesting times in the AL East for sure, and they're going to be up it even if they want a wild card spot. They're going to have to earn every
Yeah,
single one of those wins when it comes to interdivision play.
yeah, and that's where that pitching comes in. So let's hope that they've got 5 to 6 guys who they can strut out confidently and be the envy of every other team. And then again, when it comes time for either a big trade to happen or whatnot, you can draw from a position of strength,
Yeah.
right, to get somebody in there who can swing a bat and maybe put that offense over the top too. So. But yeah, as we're wrapping up, before we get into our special guest segment with Mr. Morreale, I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the biggest news locally that's happened in the last week, which is professional lacrosse is on its way back to Ottawa with the Ottawa Black Bears. So let's get a golf
Hey.
clap for professional lacrosse making its way up to the nation's capital. I myself could not be any more thrilled about this. I love the sport of lacrosse. I played it growing up. There's nothing better in my mind than a more, balanced sport than lacrosse because it has elements of every single other sport you could think of. It's got basketball elements to it. It's got football elements to
I
it. It's got
love
hockey
those
elements to
3-point
it.
shots in lacrosse. Let me tell you, nothing gets the blood
Absolutely,
going.
absolutely. Well, but you look at the way that they run their offense. I mean, it's very much basketball related.
Yeah.
They run their lanes. They set picks. Like they do things that you see in other sports. And yeah, like this is again to me, it's the most underrated sport out there because it contains all these elements. Playing it, I will say, it is the funnest sport to play for anyone who loves physical sports because man, you can get away with a lot of stuff playing lacrosse. And anyone who wants an entertaining professional atmosphere to go to, you're not going to get any more bang for your buck than a professional lacrosse game. So I am so excited that the Ottawa Black Bears will be premiering this upcoming season in the NLL.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is for those that remember, kind of the second iteration of
Yep.
professional lacrosse in Ottawa. What was the other? It was at the Renegades? Rebels? Rebels. Ottawa Rebels?
Rebels.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
knew it was something with an R there.
No, the Renegades was the very,
Yeah.
very poor CFL team
Yeah.
that inhabited TD Place from 2001 to 2005.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they're a litany of early 2000 R-based teams that were struggling in the nation's capital there. But
Just a
I
tad.
mean, it's always an entertaining watch for sure. I'm not going to sit here and try and profess to be any kind of lacrosse savant. So, I was telling you the story there. I managed a boys and girls club, and we went up and we bought a whole bunch of lacrosse sticks for him and the hockey helmets. And I'm like, man, the kids are really going to love this. And we ran that program. And the very next day, I had to go out and buy hockey gloves for all the kids because all the nicks and bruises and all that they were having on us. So they had themselves a good time for sure. But
Yeah.
it's a physical sport. It's a fast-paced sport as well too. So for those that are, can't bother to watch the defensive struggles of low-scoring games or anything like that, you're not going to see that here. It's really just an exciting time on the Ottawa sports scene because you look at all the things that have happened in the last couple of years and what's still coming down the pipeline as well too, right? Like you've got the PWHL franchise that just popped up here. We've got obviously massive renovations proposed for TD Place, so home of the 67s, to get that kind of modernized and whatnot. Obviously, the Red Blacks are back. We've got, the Senators just got sold. They're going to move down somewhere downtown, like Sutcliffe. The mayor's proposing one thing. LeBreton's still getting floated out there. So
Yeah.
still a as yet to be determined location, but it really is a lot of things that are finally starting to happen for, what a lot of other Canadians kind of used to playfully call, the town that fun forgot, which was Ottawa, where there's not a lot to do. Well, we're suddenly starting to get a few more options. Ottawa Blackjacks. So we're going to talk about CEBL in a little bit with our friend Mike Morreale there. Like another
Yeah.
phenomenal professional product. So these are big things to happen to any city. And Winnipeg, we started the episode kind of off talking about, hey, there's some huge effects if you are to lose a professional sports franchise. Well, those same things, by that same token, there's some huge ripple effects that come with
Yeah.
gaining a sports franchise. So New York Riptide coming on up north of the border there.
Yeah. And, to echo your statements, I mean, 100% accurate. The impact that it has socially, the impact that it has, financially, it's a huge win whenever a city can get something like this, to come through and actually be a part of their identities. So, you mentioned all the great things happening in Ottawa, and you're 100% right. I mean, and we haven't even mentioned, Atletico Madrid,
Mhm.
that's based out of Ottawa as well. Like they've got a franchise that's playing professional soccer here. So, um, it's so good to see so many things happening right in our backyard. And now it's like, all right, if you want something in regards to theater, we've got it. If you want something in regards to, a boys' night out, we've got it. If you want something that's more kind of laid back and casual, we've got it. If you want something that's high energy, that'll captivate anybody, we've got it. If you want something to do with your family, we've got it. So, the sport landscape in Ottawa is at an all-time high, and I could not be any happier that everything is here. And like I said, the fact that the sport of lacrosse is now here, hopefully this can be this type of thing we mentioned at the start of the show with Vince Carter, having that, big boon effect on, the Canadian market with basketball. I would love to see lacrosse in this city and the surrounding areas really take a rocket ship to the moon here because, like I said, the fact that this sport is so undervalued for everything that it brings in regards to entertainment, skill level, things of that nature, it really does deserve to have the curtain pulled back a little bit so people can see exactly what type of great sport that it is because it's one of the oldest sports in the world,
Mhm.
right? Like this is something that was played well before anyone even thought about sports. It was just something that, the indigenous people played, in regards to, taking over land and everything like that. So this is such a great kind of homage to get this sport back up in this country and in a city like Ottawa, especially being the capital city of the country. So yeah, excitement levels are very high on my end.
Yeah. And it's good to see as well too, it come in with a stable partner like Senator Sports and Entertainment there as well too, where had they come and I think New York's brand was, I think it was like GF Sports and Entertainment or something like
Yeah,
that. Like had they said no, we're gonna do it on our own, we're all good, thanks but no thanks. I would be a little bit more pessimistic about it, right? Playing out a CTC for the foreseeable future, and then I would have to assume when they do make the move downtown, having a downtown arena, right near
yeah,
the Ottawa River, right across the bridge from Gatineau and Quebec and all of that good stuff. Like there's a lot of positives that would come from that. And I think, we were talking to Steve Warren the other episode there, and he was talking referencing how Michael Andlauer keeps preaching best in class, right? Like,
yeah,
well, you look at some of the American best in class franchise, right? It's the Lakers, right? It's the Yankees. It's some of these things that have so much going on in their building and helping to build their brand. And oh, if you're a Lakers
Yeah.
fan, you're also probably, hey, the Sparks play out of here. Oh, look, the Clippers play out of here for at least the next little while until their arena's ready to go. And so there's so much just cross promotion, and Lauer is smart in knowing that, hey, if this big downtown arena move is going to happen, I need to keep that place absolutely bumping 365 days a year. And whether that's through Sens games or lacrosse or concerts or whatever it might be, like it's all setting up to be what we all kind of hope that downtown arena ultimately does for that parcel of land.
Yeah. And, you know, at the end of the day, real estate's the name of the game of professional sports. And if you can get people down to your facility, you get people down to your grounds, that's how you become financially stable. That's how you become viable in, in the national landscape, the international landscape. Because once you become that viable, option, well, guess what else comes? The secondary stuff, the drafts, the road shows, the tours that these sports bring in, right? Like there's so many other things that people don't really take into consideration that actually come with having a stable franchise that people want to see.
Mhm.
And 100% agree with you. So yeah, I mean, with a guy like Michael Landauer, he's not gonna dip his toe in that water. He's jumping full in, right? And the fact that he's partnering with this group protects him in the long term, but it also allows him and his group to really put forward that best in class scenario that he's been preaching. So yeah, I mean, this is a savvy move, very underrated in the grand scheme of things, but I think with the growth of, the NLL over the last, 10, 15 years, this is a good time for them to get in there. And yeah, let's just see what happens with it. And hopefully we can look back at this moment and say, the Ottawa Black Bears, 15, 20 years from now have been one of the, the catalysts of growing the National Lacrosse League to even greater heights, right? So it's a good thing for all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, perfect segue into our interview with Mike Morreale there as well too, because we're going to be unpacking a lot of stuff about CEBL, and obviously, 5 years into it already, sixth season coming up, what it looks like as far as expansion, what changes to the drafts as well too. So Mike actually breaks a little bit of news there, so we're going to get the scoop before all the TSNs and whatnot of the world. But yeah,
Yeah,
it really does go to speak to pulling back the curtain on what it takes to run some of these leagues that truly are, countrywide. This isn't just the, Toronto basketball league where everyone's in the GTA. Like we're going pretty much coast to coast here, six different
yeah.
provinces. So yeah, it's an exciting time just in sports landscape in general in Canada with some of the stuff that's going on with our domestic leagues and getting more teams in internationally.
Yeah. And without further ado, let's turn it over and let's get a golf clap for Mr. Mike Morreale, the commissioner of the CEBL, for coming on. And again, golf clap to you, buddy, for conducting that interview.
Joining us today on the podcast, we've got Mike Morreale, CEBL Commissioner, getting ready for a big 2024 Canadian basketball season. Mike, thanks so much for taking some time for us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great. I'm excited. The off season is coming to a close before you know it.
Oh, I know. Only a few short weeks, and then you're into kind of the March Madness feel of things, and basketball's back on people's radars. Then you guys are off to the races for the summer. So busy time in CEBL land, I take it.
Yeah, it's free agency open not too long ago. So as we speak, the things dinging on my end. We got signings happening and getting publicized. So this is good. This is where it starts all coming together. We've spent the last, since September 1, I guess, just planning, not even just for 2024, but looking beyond 24 into 2025, 2026, and where we're going. And things are looking very promising. So we still got a 2024 season to play, and a really good one. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And I mean, you raised an interesting point right there. Didn't even have it written down on my list of questions, but for those that maybe don't know kind of how the sausage gets made, and the process that goes on behind the curtains, like free agency for a league like the CEBL, like what is that process like? Obviously the teams and the agents are in discussion, they come to agreement on terms, then what is it, they're faxing stuff into you to review contracts and getting approved? Like what even goes on at head office during kind of this off-season period for you guys?
Well, free agency is always big for us because all our players sign 1-year deals, and
Right.
they do that because of they also hold other contracts in FIBA. So there's never a point in time we get to have 2 contracts being held at the same time. So that's the way we're built. We get a lot of repeat players coming back to teams, but we also get a bunch of players that want to try different things and new players coming in. So every contract gets signed by me at the end of the day. So I get a sense of kind of what's going on. We don't announce them necessarily right away. We let the teams decide on when they want to announce some key player signings. So you would have seen some like Teddy Buckets in Winnipeg and some others. And then over the next several months, there'll be an onslaught here of signings. And then, of course, working our way to a CBL draft coming up as well, and future signings there. So the process is all electronic through DocuSign, and it goes to the team president, and it goes to the player agent. Player's agent goes to the player, goes to myself, and then it gets registered and then announced internally and then announced externally. So it's again, that's where the sausage is made, right? That's all the work behind the scenes. Fans just see the end result, and that's fine. They don't need to know all the rest of the stuff that goes on.
Yeah. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain there. Just
That's right.
Whatever Oz
Nothing to
says.
see here. Nothing to see here.
Exactly. But I mean, for those who have been following the league for a while now, this has been, I guess, a quieter off season, right? There have been a lot of relocations, a lot of expansion teams going on and all that. So maybe contrast, this off season compared to some of the other ones that you've been through in terms of what the league has maybe been able to focus on because they don't have these giant things like, expansion team getting off the ground and whatnot.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. We every off season, with the exception of this one, at least publicly, has been full of stuff to do. From 2019 to 2020, it was COVID, and then from 2020 and 21, it was COVID again, and then we added teams in 2022, and then last year was a big off season for us as we reconfigured the look and feel of the league. We're very happy with those changes that were made. There are no changes going into 2024, which is a good thing. It's nice to have that consistency, right. But we are, planning, major changes into 2025 and beyond, and all for the benefit of the fan and the player, and of course for the league and our team. So, it's quiet isn't bad. It allows you to think ahead a little more. It's allowed me there's other challenges that you're dealing with. We've moved from a single entity league to a league that now has 6 owners across the 10 teams. So there's different people at the table, and there's different relationships, which are all, very positive and beneficial to the overall health and growth of the league. So that's where I'm concentrating most of my time. And then with them, introducing the future of what's going on. So as the rest of the team here at our office works on, and across the teams work on all the day-to-day operational pieces, I'm allowed to look into the future, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, get to deal with some of the fun, big picture, grand vision stuff there then. I mean, one of those, I guess, questions that fans would have coming into this season here, and, it's now been, I guess, a full calendar year and possibly even more, but the Newfoundland Growlers who, they were part of the league, they suspended operations. What's maybe even just sort of an update as far as whether it's the Growlers themselves or even just kind of the league's vision into Atlantic Canada? What does that kind of look like moving forward then?
Well, the Newfoundland experience was a really good one. It didn't pan out the way we wanted, not because of the people or the fans or the people behind the scenes. It just, we didn't get into the facility we wanted to get into, and that changed the fate of where we were going. There was no horizon to do it. So, we packed up there, and it's unlikely you'll see anything back there in the immediate future. But, the Maritimes, specifically, if you look at Halifax, and even as recent as yesterday or this past weekend, they had another great AUS kind of playoff for men's and women's basketball, and it was packed in Halifax. And we've seen this now repeatedly. This is not a new phenomenon. We've seen it. Obviously, it's a great fan base out in Halifax. We do have interest in going to the Maritimes, specifically Halifax. We've been talking to certain people. I get a lot of messages of fans that want to see basketball there. And really, that was part of the whole plan of what happened last year. Like the ability to kind of really create the league that we want to be, which is where we were last year and this year and going forward, allows you to think about expansion markets that now become more realistic and reasonable. Mm-hmm. So, I'm not quiet about it. Obviously, there's certain markets we want to get to in Quebec and back out west and other markets in between. And the Maritimes is one. And Halifax is certainly the biggest front runner for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like every time we have you on the show here, expansion talk is always one of the biggest topics because, it kind of speaks to the demand for fans wanting to get basketball across the country. And, it's a good problem to have. But, you've also preached patience as far as not wanting to go too big, too fast, too soon. And then, you start seeing some markets potentially collapsing in on themselves. So when you're weighing the desire to get into markets like a Halifax, potentially like a Quebec City, there's also things like, well, we want to have balanced conferences. And so, if the East gets one, then we got to look at the West and all that. So, how much of a priority is it to, I guess, get to a number? Because you've kind of mentioned, 16, maybe 8 and 8 is kind of that sweet spot that eventually you can work towards, versus we need to make sure we get the cities right so that it has not a cascading effect on our overall schedule. So like, what are your main priorities, I guess, that you're weighing when you are looking at potential expansion cities?
Well, you're right. Balance is very important. So growth just to grow is not necessarily always the best thing, right? There has to be planned growth and sustained growth. So the decisions we make are being talked about for the last several years, right? So, where we're going in the future, and it sometimes changes as we make key decisions like we did last year in the off season and relocating some teams and the conference model that we set up. So now, yes, there are obviously ideally ways you want to maintain the conference model of East and West. Depending on where cities are added, you could consider looking to even a 3-conference model based on the number of teams and size. So there are ways to do it, but there are target markets and target groups. And I would suggest that the target groups are far more important than the target markets, because the strong ownership groups are really paramount to where we want to go. So if you look across where our teams are now, where we want to go, I think we can have those 15 to 16 teams all within the top 20 to 25 cities in this country. And I think we want to maintain that population size, access to facilities, and all those things that are important, and fan bases, and that geographically makes sense as you travel and all that other stuff. So, there's a plan, but there's always a plan A, B, and C, depending on what falls into place first. And, sometimes I feel like a juggler trying to have these things all come together. And if we can't do them on, some of the proposed schedules, then we take our time to do it. It's not a rush here. We're pretty careful about kind of the who and the where, and then everything else will fall into place.
Yeah. And, I think that's been one thing that a lot of fans will say the CEBL has done a really strong job at, is building things the proper way, not just throwing stuff out there too quickly. And, you look at the clash that you guys just had in Quebec City there, which for those who are listening that might not be aware of it, it's kind of like a de facto all-star game style event there. And, is there any big takeaways that you guys took from that? And are there maybe even any plans to, all right, now that we've gotten that product out there, what can we kind of layer onto it? Does it become kind of an NBA All-Star weekend style thing where you've got different stuff going on different days? What was kind of the learning experience from putting on such an event?
Well, there's lots of learnings. I think I was impressed with the way the players approached the game. They didn't approach it like a typical in-season all-star game, which you're scared to get hurt. They approached it as, and there's some money on the line, and it helps, but they approached it as a real game, and they're entertaining at the same time. So from a fan base perspective, you saw the dunks and the threes, and you take some extra risks you wouldn't take in a game, but competitively it was a really good game. So that was encouraging.
It wasn't the NBA 211 to 197 shenanigans that we saw there.
No, thank God. And then it also kind of reinforced, hey, maybe we have a particular project here that we can grow over time, like an event that we can maybe take to other places across the country to be a test case. And as far as the test case, goes, Quebec City just, really floored us with their commitment to coming to the game, their interest in the game. There is no local team there, so it really was just on the backs of what they've heard or seen or what have you, whatever kind of marketing we put out. And that was very encouraging. So it bodes well for us. Obviously, take another long, hard look at Quebec City. It's not hard to see that there's some real potential there. We continue those conversations. And then it does serve as a chance for us to look at, what the league does on a yearly basis in terms of events, because we have our championship weekend and we're proposing some other different type events throughout the year. And it's also, raise the hands of some of the teams that want to maybe try to bring that, clash concept or all-star concept as a precursor to maybe hosting a championship weekend in the future. So it really worked out quite well. And of course, there's all the metrics and everything that go behind it. We had a great amount of fans in the stands, over 7,000 fans, and it came off very well on TV, and the players liked it, and the fans liked it. So it's got some legs, and it adds another little wrinkle to what we can do if we need to use that to our advantage.
Yeah. And another entry point for fans to get involved in the
Right.
game and all of that as well too, right? And I think a lot of people in the Canadian basketball landscape can kind of point towards, all right, hey, Raptors winning the championship had a huge spike. All of a sudden, a lot more kids were choosing basketball over hockey when it came time to sign up for winter sports. And there's another big one obviously coming up this summer, Paris 2024, Canadian men's team finally, returning to the world stage there. Like, what kind of, effect do you think that seeing, the Shea Gilgeous-Alexanders and RJ Barretts and all that of the world actually representing Canada on the Olympic stage is going to have for basketball at kind of the grassroots level? And maybe does the league even have any kind of tie-in events, whether it's, a viewing party or something like that, planned for this summer?
Well, I'll answer the last one first. So the semis and gold medal matches of men's basketball this year's Olympics will take place during our championship weekend.
Okay.
So we want to do something in and around our championship weekend, that whether it's a gathering party, a viewing party, etc. I think that's really important to show our support. We're excited about it. It actually kind of falls, on the Saturday, which is the day before our game. So it's a great lead into CEBL championship game. But truthfully, we're very, very excited about the success of Team Canada, both men's and women's.
Yeah.
We support Canada basketball. We help promote their events. We just held a very successful event here in the Niagara area a few days ago, where Canada played their America Cup game against Nicaragua at a 45-point blowout. And it was just great to see 4,000 people there celebrating basketball in the winter months, right? The non-typical for CEBL. And 10 of the 12 players on the court played in the CEBL at one time. So there's so many interconnected things that, it's a great time to be in Canada basketball. But if the men's and women's are able to really, place, win a medal, come close, do some, pull up some upsets, whatever it may be during the Olympics, it could be a catalyst for just an enormous boom in registrations for basketball. And we see it already in certain markets. Winnipeg had a 23% increase in basketball representations, and they attributed about 19% of that to having the Sea Bears in town. Mm-hmm. So there's those type of things so we know we're all trying to move the needle. But I think if Canada is to be successful on the basketball stage, on the biggest stage, which is the Olympics, that, we will see, celebrations that would mimic or be bigger than the Raptors winning. Because we're talking about fans from coast to coast. And I noticed that a lot in my travels, is that you go to some smaller markets relative to Toronto, like Saskatoon or Edmonton or Calgary, and there's not a profound affinity for the Raptors. It's a Toronto-based team. When they win, of course, everyone's excited, but there's a huge affinity for Canadian basketball. And, players that grew up in that market or played on the national team, and just the pride of waving the Canadian flag. So, I talked to Michael Bartlett about this a lot. Michael's the CEO of Canada Basketball. We just believe that it's on the precipice of being enormous, and not just a one and done, like continuing this thing. The buy-in's there from the players. The talent's certainly there, and it's going to be exciting to see.
Yeah. You got all these grand visions. Now we just need Canada to go out there and execute and make sure we actually get to the medal round so that we can host all of these events there.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, obviously, another key part to the league and kind of ties into overall that model of, developing that next level of not only domestic professional player, but also potentially even representing Canada on international stages. You just mentioned, 10 of the 12 players that were on the Canadian roster previously played in the CEBL at one point there. Is the U Sports draft. And that's going to be coming up, obviously, ahead of the season kicking off. Are there any plans to change any kind of format or anything? Have you seen, it's traditionally been kind of a 2-round event. Is there demand to see that expand to 3 rounds? Like, what's sort of the reception you've seen from the U Sport coaches and the players who've actually gone through that program?
Well, you must be reading my emails because there are some changes. And I'll share some of those with you. We're announcing them rather soon. I just approved a press release today to go out. But I'll talk about the U Sports draft just in general. It has been, I think, by far one of the most engaged parts of what we do. Certainly from a digital and social media engagement in terms of people genuinely interested in U Sport players and players they know or went to school with or friends with or et cetera, et cetera. That's been really profound and great because it kind of harkens back to what we're building here, which is a proud domestic league. We're going to bring in talent from everywhere, but it's rooted in proud, Canadians because, man to man, they are tops in the world at what they do. They're the best imports on teams all across the world. They get brought in like Americans do to be the stars. So being able to bring them all back home is great, but developing that platform is really important. And the players get a chance to play, and they play well. And they return to U Sports and continue to dominate, whether it's, you just have to look at what Diego Mafia is doing again this year, right? And setting records and doing all the stuff he does, and they build a brand, and it goes across the board. There's so many of them. It's a great thing to talk about. But we do know that, my hope is that we can get more of those players playing because they've shown they can play. It helps certainly develop the university institution. And this year, we're going to announce in a couple of days, depending when this comes out. And we are changing the U Sport draft to the CEBL draft, and now also including the CCAA, the Canadian College kids as well. So if you attend a post-secondary institution in this country and you play basketball and you're Canadian, you have an opportunity to get drafted into the CEBL, not just drafted, signed to a contract to play in the CEBL. So that is going to broaden, the base. The majority will likely still come from U Sports. It's the biggest, producer of talent in this country in terms of numbers. But there are hidden gems everywhere, and we don't want to miss out on that. We want to give opportunities to everyone. So it will be a 3-round draft, similar. So we're adding another round. It's a snake draft, so it goes from bottom to top and back again. There are some rules that have been put into place for the salary cap that is an incentive for teams to dress and play more U Sport, or this undergrad players, developmental players, what we call them, people that are players that are returning to school after a CBL season. So teams will be able to dress up to 3 developmental players at no hit to the salary cap. So what that does is encourages the use of developed players, but it also provides far more financial incentives for the teams to attract higher level players to fill out the salary cap. So on a per capita basis, there's more money to go around if you use that strategy. And I think all teams will find a way to do that. Some may play with 3 out the gate. Some may play at certain parts in the year that way. That's really their prerogative. And we also changed our international rule, which used to be a mandatory international player, and now it's a mandatory international player or a mandatory developmental player. So there's more flexibility there to help grow the game at the post-secondary level.
There we go. So we're
So
breaking
you heard it
news
here
all
first.
over the place. Yeah, there you go. 1867 Sports Show exclusive. But no, that's great to hear, right? Because, like you say, there truly are hidden gems at every level of sport across, the entire country here. And so being able to expand that to the collegiate levels as well, too, as the youth sport, and I think it's having it tied into possibly real world salary cap implications incentivizes it, right? Because, you've got teams with championship aspirations. You've got a seasoned pro who's played whatever overseas for a couple of years, or this kid who might be a nice kid, but, is first year university or whatever, right? So, actually getting them that incentive to keep them on the roster, continue to developing them. It's a classic case of, high tide rises all boats here, where you're going to be able to get a lot of tangible, real world professional experience for these kids to then go and take back to their collegiate levels, where they're going to see some really big increases. And, you look at some of the players who have gone through that program over the years, they tend to go back and have some pretty standout seasons their next time through. Like, are there any that maybe jump front to mind to you as far as like, here's the poster boy of why we're doing this project? Like, it's just worked out so well with such a player.
Well, I think Thomas Kennedy is the one that jumps to mind, because Thomas started with us in year one at university. He played 4 consecutive years as a developmental player in our league, with Hamilton, with Vancouver, with Scarborough. And we can tell all along, like, this guy's going to be, like, he's a good pro. He out the gate, he's a pro. He works hard. He's got the size. He's got the skill. He's a great teammate. He knows how to make plays. So to see him now go for his first kind of European or international pro contract this year and really dominate, and then join the Canadian national team as one of the bigs, that has been the one, I think, for us that has kind of set the bar. But there's others every year. I mean, every team has a handful of guys that just wow you. It could be Elijah Miller in Edmonton, or, like I said, Diego Mafia, or Adam Page, or I can go Aaron Rooms and all these guys that have come and gone. I always going to miss a lot of people, so I apologize. But the point is, it's working. And not only does it help us from a basketball perspective and help them from a basketball perspective, but from a community building perspective, it's great, because all these kids are dreaming to go play somewhere, to play pro, to do their next thing, and they have a family behind them that supports them and wants to see it happen. And those family members become fans of the team and the CEBL, and it just helps grow the ecosystem and gets everybody trying to get people rowing in the same direction onto good things.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, looking into kind of your crystal ball here, 5 years from now, obviously we've talked expansion, we've talked adding on to, the Clash, we've talked reform to youth sports draft. Is there anything that we maybe haven't touched on that you think is a real point of emphasis that CEBL wants to put into place moving forward? Like, I know in previous conversations, we've even talked about at some point, branching into maybe even the women's side of basketball. Like, where do these things kind of fall into the order of operation over the next 5 years as points of emphasis for the league?
Yeah, in no particular order. There's going to be the continuation to try and get the highest available talent here. So, instituting things like a marquee player rule to allow for players to come outside the cap, to not just help from on the court, but help in the, sharing the CBL experience and the awareness of the CBL. A return to, kind of a championship weekend neutral site without a host, right? We've always had a host buy into championship weekend. We do this year as well. But I think in the future, you're going to see a much more typical, strategy around championship weekend. The thing is, we have the infrastructure to make it work for when a few other people want to come to the table to help. And then there's also, what do we do in our off seasons? How do we, we'd like to expand the season a little bit, right? We want to get more time, more games. Understanding we have some pretty hard kind of in-out dates just based on other players, playing in other leagues. And, what do we do in the off season in terms of attracting the club championships and the minor basketball, and really trying to raise the the bar for basketball across the country at all levels. So that is the hope. And in a perfect world, that midterm to long term is playing in purpose-built basketball facilities, like indoor facilities that obviously can host other sports, but made for indoor sport. The seating's made for it, the configuration's made for it, the fan experience is made for it. There are none that exist in this country, which is crazy to me, and there needs to be. And I think that'll come, and it's going to take some serious lobbying and effort, and probably some interest from the private sector and public sector to get it done. But there's a desperate need for facilities across the country. It's hard to find a place to play basketball that shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And, anyone who comes from a European sport model where you go over and here's these tiny little hamlets in the middle of nowhere, and they've got, a purpose-built basketball facility. And yet in a country here of, almost 40 million people, they're few and far between to find. So yeah, it's definitely one that trickles obviously all the way down to the grassroots level as well too, trying to find multi-court facilities or anything like that rather than operating out of schools. But I mean, Mike, we appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. For those that are listening, though, that have maybe never tuned into a CEBL game or aren't sure even where to find it, like, where are the best places for them to get up-to-date information and maybe even stream some games here this summer?
Yeah, I mean, go to our handles are the best on whether it's Twitter or TikTok or Instagram platform called CEBL Plus that you can get through our mobile app or the website. And that really is where you can start finding out more. You can watch games on demand, you can watch docuseries, you can learn more about our players, you can watch highlight packs. But we are, the best basketball played in this country. We're the best basketball played at the time of year that we play. We've sent 14 players to the NBA over the last couple of years, and we've created a pathway, that through the CEBL to, bigger and better opportunities in basketball, whether that's the NBA, whether that's internationally or what have you. So we're really encouraged, and the best part is we get to bring home our top Canadians and develop our new up-and-coming Canadian players. And you can find us on TSN. You can find us on TSN Plus, on CEBL Plus. Soon to be more, hopefully, domestic opportunities in Canada and certainly outside Canada as well. We have a couple announcements coming up with some other abilities to watch us outside of Canada. So that's it, and we hope you join us. I mean, everybody's invited, so welcome on board.